Oh, wow. Will Smith just smacked the shit out of me.
Chris, I apologize to you.
A lot of people go, Chris, how come you didn't do nothing back? Because I got parents. That's why. Because I was raised. And you know what my parents taught me? Don't fight in front of white people.
Will Smith didn't step into Hollywood as a joke. He walked in like a sure thing. For almost 20 years, his name alone was money in the bank. Studios didn't take a risk with him. They made an investment. When Will's face hit a movie poster, it meant guaranteed profits, charm, and blockbuster magic every single time. By the late 90s and early 2000s, he wasn't just a star, he was a machine. Pulling in more than $30 million per movie, Will had become one of the most dependable forces Hollywood had ever seen. And that kind of dominance, it didn't happen by luck. Will studied the game like a pro athlete, breaking down every move on film. He analyzed what made audiences laugh, cheer, or cry, and he used it all to his advantage. He kept his image spotless. No controversy, no profanity, no unnecessary drama. Everyone could love him. Kids looked up to him, parents respected him, and international fans couldn't get enough. In a business built on chaos and short-lived fame, Will Smith was stability itself. Every movie, no matter how wild.
Jada, I love you. G.I. Jane 2, can't wait to see it. All right? That was a nice one. Okay. I'm out here. Richard. Oh, wow. Will Smith just smacked the shit out of me.
My wife's name out your mouth.
Wow, dude.
Yes.
It was a G.I. Jane jump.
Keep my wife's name out your mouth.
I'm going to, okay? Okay. That was a greatest night in the history of television. Okay.
Alien attacks, secret agents, or the end of the world had one guarantee. Will Smith would make sure everything was all right by the end. Even when critics rolled their eyes, ticket sales didn't care. People still showed up. Producers didn't need Oscars. They needed those massive opening weekends, and Will delivered every single time. But behind that perfect grin and calm confidence, there was something deeper. Will wasn't just selling tickets, he was selling a brand. The smiling hero, the family man, the clean-cut pro who thrived in an industry full of chaos. While other stars crashed and burned, Will stood tall, polished, disciplined, and unstoppable. Will Smith built an image of being calm, collected, and untouchable, like he was made of glass that couldn't crack. That clean, grounded persona became just as valuable as his acting talent by the mid-2000s. He wasn't just an actor anymore. He was a brand wrapped in charm, discipline, and that emotional openness that made people feel like they knew him personally. Fans didn't just watch Will Smith movies, they cheered for Will Smith, the man himself. Hollywood loved that too. The industry rewarded him with trust, power, and respect, all because he seemed to have mastered the rare balance between fame and control. And Will knew how fragile that balance was, which is why what came later hit everyone so hard. When the cracks started to show, they weren't the typical Hollywood scandals. No arrests, no wild meltdowns, no addiction splashed across tabloids at first. It started quietly, then suddenly spiraled until the entire world was watching him on a live stage. By the time the 2022 Oscars rolled around, the tension had been simmering for years. That infamous slap didn't just appear out of thin air. It carried years of frustration, wounded pride, and pressure from keeping up an image stretched to its breaking point.
Why didn't you apologize to Chris in your acceptance speech? I was fogged out by that point. It's all fuzzy. I've reached out to Chris, and the message that came back is that he's not ready to talk. And when he is, he will reach out. So I will say to you, Chris, I apologize to you. My behavior was unacceptable, and I'm here whenever you're ready to.
To really understand that explosive moment, you have to rewind 6 years back, to another Oscars night that planted the first seed of conflict. In 2016, Will and Jada made headlines when they publicly boycotted the Academy Awards, calling out the lack of diversity in the nominees. The protest sparked a major industry conversation, but it also put Will right in the crosshairs of critics and comedians. That same night, host Chris Rock addressed the boycott live on stage, and his joke about it didn't feel like support. He turned it from a social statement into a punchline, framing it as nothing more than jealousy over not being nominated. The crowd laughed, the jokes hit, but Will stayed silent, at least publicly. Still, that sting didn't fade. Fast forward to March 27, 2022. The night Will Smith was about to win his first ever Oscar after decades of building a spotless legacy. The energy in the room was light, electric, and celebratory. Millions were watching around the world. Then Chris Rock took the stage to present an award and, doing what hosts do, cracked a joke, one aimed at Jada Pinkett Smith's shaved head. The crowd laughed, even Will laughed for a split second, but then everything changed. Jada's reaction was instant, cold, visible, and powerful. And just like that, Will's laughter vanished in seconds. Will Smith suddenly stood up, walked straight toward the stage, and smacked Chris Rock across the face, live in front of millions. The entire room went silent.
That I considered private.
You just feel like it ain't really nobody's business. But now Black Twitter has claimed it as their business.
You and I were going through a very difficult time.
Yeah.
And we decided.
I was done with your ass.
Yeah, you kicked me to the curb.
I was done with you.
Yeah.
Marriages have that, though. Marriages have that.
Yeah, we basically, we broke up.
And then what did you do, Jada?
Well, you know, I think from there, you know, as time went on, I got into a different kind of entanglement with August.
An entanglement?
Yes.
For a split second, no one knew if it was a planned skit or a real moment of rage. But the truth hit fast. As Will sat back down, he yelled for Chris to keep my wife's name out of your mouth. The broadcast muted, but social media exploded within seconds. What was supposed to be the proudest night of his life, the moment his career came full circle, instantly flipped into one of the most jaw-dropping scenes in television history. Minutes later, that same stage became even more surreal when Will returned to accept his first Oscar. He was emotional, in tears, and his apology came out clouded, part sorrow, part justification. He called it love, protection, a reaction to pressure. But no matter how he tried to explain it, the moment had already redefined everything. That slap wasn't just a hit, it was a fracture. It shattered the flawless image that had protected him for decades, exposing the man behind the mask everyone thought they knew. The backlash hit like a tidal wave. Within hours, Will Smith's story went from triumph to humiliation. The Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences didn't stay silent either. They condemned him publicly. And this time, it wasn't just a slap on the wrist. After private meetings and heated debates, they dropped a real punishment, a 10-year ban from the Oscars and all Academy events. For a man who'd spent his whole life earning Hollywood's respect, that exile cut deep. Will tried to control the damage fast. He resigned from the Academy before the final verdict, framing it as accountability. Then came the apologies, first in writing, then on camera. He spoke to fans, colleagues, and eventually reached out to Chris Rock himself, saying he was ready to talk whenever Chris was. The words sounded sincere, careful, and emotional, but the timing was too late. The public had already made their minds, and behind the scenes, his spotless image was officially cracked wide open. The fallout didn't just sting, it snowballed fast. Projects were paused, some quietly canceled, and studio doors that once swung open for Will suddenly started to close. Executives who once saw him as a guaranteed win were now hesitating, crunching numbers and questioning the risk. Will Smith, the man who had been Hollywood's safest bet for decades, was no longer considered safe. And in this town, perception is just as powerful as talent. Even people who had worked with him for years started keeping their distance, not because they turned against him, but because nobody wanted to be the next to take a hit from the controversy.
Yes.
A relationship.
Yes, it was a relationship, absolutely. The only person that can give permission in that particular circumstance is myself.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. But what August was probably trying to communicate, because I could actually see how he would perceive it as permission, because we were separated amicably.
Yeah.
And I think he also wanted to make it clear that he's not a homewrecker. I just wanted to feel good. It had been so long since I felt good. And it was really a joy to just help heal somebody. We ride together, we die together. Bad marriage for life.
The same industry that once revolved around his star power now waited to see if defending him was even worth it. The worst part of the fallout was the painful contradiction sitting at its core. Will Smith's entire empire had been built on control, emotional control, professional control, moral control. But that one slap, it was everything he'd spent years avoiding: impulsive, raw, and public. It wasn't just physical, it was symbolic, the total opposite of what his brand stood for. For a man known for discipline and composure, that one loss of control hit harder than any critic's review. Even his Oscar win, the one that should have been the proudest moment of his life, became tangled in the chaos. What should have been a symbol of triumph turned into a symbol of controversy. The award stopped feeling like recognition and started feeling like a reminder of the night everything changed. From then on, every time Will tried to explain, people called it excuses. Every time he stayed silent, it looked like he was hiding something. The 10-year Oscar ban was the official punishment. The real damage was the loss of cultural respect. And once that slips away in Hollywood, it's almost impossible to earn it back, especially when millions watched it crumble live. To most viewers, the slap seemed sudden and shocking, but to those paying close attention, it looked like the final crack in something that had been quietly breaking for years. Will and Jada's marriage, once seen as one of Hollywood's most solid unions, had been sitting under a spotlight that only grew harsher with time. The issue wasn't that problems existed, it was how publicly they were discussed. Everything changed when singer August Alsina dropped a bombshell, claiming he had been romantically involved with Jada Pinkett Smith. The story was already explosive, but it went nuclear when Alsina said Will Smith knew about the relationship and had even given his blessing. The claim was never confirmed by anyone outside the story, but it forced Will and Jada to face it head on.
Come meet our family.
Go home. Put my jacket on.
Okay.
Put my tie up.
Very nice shirt.
So Jaden, this is your first premiere. How you feeling tonight?
Premiering.
Premiering? Wait, premiering?
Yeah.
I want to present the bestest brother in the whole entire world, Jaden Smith.
Put the pose on, baby. Put the
Hit another one. There you go. There you go. One more. Hit it one more time, baby. Hit it one more.
I thought I would be nervous, but I'm not nervous. Well, I'm sort of nervous because I thought I would be nervous because the lights were hitting my eyes. I thought that would hurt.
Pretty much the boss wherever she goes, which is why I named her Reign, R-E-I-G-N. So she gets it naturally. You know, her mom and her dad, you know, we can be some pretty boss.
And not through a press statement or lawyer-crafted note. Instead, they sat together on Red Table Talk, Jada's own online show, and laid it all out for the world to see. On camera, Jada spoke calmly about a period of separation in their marriage and admitted she had entered what she called an entanglement. Sitting beside her, Will looked straight at her and pressed for clarity. And after some back and forth, she confirmed it had been a romantic relationship. The episode was supposed to feel open and healing, a couple showing honesty and growth. But what the public saw told a different story. Clips of Will's strained smile and glassy eyes spread everywhere. Memes popped up almost instantly, and that moment of supposed vulnerability turned into one of the internet's biggest talking points. What began as transparency quickly twisted into ridicule. People weren't just reacting to the confession, they were reacting to him.
What hit viewers hardest wasn't the relationship itself, but the contrast between the two of them. Jada looked steady, confident, and in control. Will looked raw, almost broken, trying to hold himself together under the weight of millions of eyes. The once untouchable movie star who used to command every room now seemed like a man stripped of his armor, sitting in pain with nowhere to hide. From that moment on, the image Will had built for decades, polished, composed, unshakable, started falling apart. His quietness, once admired as strength, now looked like surrender. Every new conversation about their marriage added more pressure, more jokes, more analysis. And little by little, that firm sense of control that once defined him began to slip away. So when Will walked onto the Oscar stage in 2022, it wasn't just about defending his wife, it was about defending himself. He wasn't only reacting to a single joke, he was reacting to years of public exposure, humiliation, and the slow collapse of the persona he'd spent his entire career building. That slap wasn't born in a moment, it was years of bottled-up emotion exploding all at once. And while the world obsessed over the marriage drama, another piece of Will Smith's carefully built legacy started to shake: the family brand. For years, the Smith household was seen as the model Hollywood family, proof that fame, discipline, and strong parenting could actually coexist. Will and Jada weren't just raising kids, they were raising successors. Every interview, every project, every red carpet moment reinforced the image of a powerful, creative dynasty, until even that began to feel unstable. Hollywood was watching every move. Jaden Smith stepped into the spotlight like it was his birthright, first walking in his father's shadow, then trying to blaze his own trail. In the beginning, it felt like destiny. His early performances showed potential, even flashes of brilliance. But over time, that unstoppable momentum started to fade. Movie offers slowed down, then stopped altogether. Jaden began shifting his energy toward music and fashion, spaces where creativity mattered more than commercial hits. But with that shift came new kinds of attention. His public appearances grew fewer, and every one of them sparked online chatter. Fans speculated about his health, his choices, his direction. What once looked like fearless self-expression began to look, to some, like a loss of focus. Around the same time, stories surfaced about Jaden wanting to move out and live on his own while still very young. That in itself wasn't shocking, but it added to a growing sense that maybe this picture-perfect family wasn't as steady as it once appeared. The once controlled narrative of unity and balance started showing cracks. Willow Smith's story took a different route, but echoed the same tension. She rocketed to fame at an age when most kids are still figuring out who they are. Whip My Hair turned her into a global sensation overnight, and with it came massive expectations that would have crushed even seasoned adults. Years later, Willow bravely opened up about her struggles with depression and self-harm, explaining how early fame and constant exposure weighed on her mental health. Her honesty earned respect, but it also changed the way people saw the Smith family. Suddenly, the story wasn't about a Hollywood dynasty thriving under pressure. It was about a family trying to survive it. The world began to see not a household of balance and strength, but one struggling with the same chaos fame often brings. Too much spotlight, too little protection. Personal pain turned public before it could properly heal. And once again, Will Smith found himself not as the man in charge, but as the man reacting to the fallout. None of it pointed to cruelty or neglect, but perception doesn't wait for the full story. And in Hollywood, perception is everything. As the headlines piled up about his marriage, masculinity, parenting, and control, the myth of the man who had it all together slowly vanished. The once unstoppable Will Smith now looked like someone surrounded by problems he couldn't fix, watching his perfect image unravel piece by piece. By the time people looked back at Will Smith, the image had completely changed. Gone was the unstoppable star of the early 2000s, the box office king who could do no wrong. What they saw now was a man taking hit after hit, a father, a husband, and a public figure trying to stand tall while his once untouchable reputation kept getting chipped away. Every new controversy, every headline, every awkward moment seemed to peel off another layer of the power he once carried so easily. But Will didn't vanish like so many others do after a fall. He refused to fade out. Instead, he took on something way harder: reinvention in real time. His new plan was all about being seen.
He showed up everywhere: podcasts, interviews, inspirational talks, deep reflections. He spoke about ego, self-awareness, accountability, and the lessons he claimed to have learned from that unforgettable Oscar night. The tone was deep, even spiritual, like he hoped wisdom could soften the world's judgment, but the response was split down the middle. Some people saw growth, others saw damage control. Audiences who wanted silence and humility thought he was talking too much, too soon. Every new appearance seemed to reopen the wound instead of healing it. What Will meant as honesty often came across like he was still performing, still trying to control the narrative instead of just owning it. The sincerity was questioned, the timing picked apart. No matter how he tried to speak from the heart, his tone never quite matched the public's fatigue. Then came the next move, reaching for a younger crowd. Will started popping up with streamers and social media personalities, stepping into digital spaces he'd never really belonged to before. Sometimes it was playful, sometimes awkward, and sometimes painfully out of sync. Viewers didn't see a legend connecting with a new generation. They saw a man searching for belonging, trying to find relevance in a world that had already moved on. Even his jokes, once natural and smooth, now felt tense, like each laugh came with pressure attached. The easy confidence that once lit up every room was replaced by nervous energy, as if every word might make or break his redemption. Nothing came easy anymore. Every clip, every interview, every attempt to smile was filtered through that one moment, and that's where his comeback stumbled. Not for lack of effort, but because he treated reputation like something you could simply explain your way back into. But Hollywood, and the world watching, doesn't forget that easily. Audiences don't just hit reset when you tell them to. If anything, Will's non-stop visibility only made things feel more uncomfortable. A little silence might have helped him regain some distance, but instead, he stayed in the spotlight, talking, appearing, explaining, and the constant exposure started to wear thin. Hollywood noticed it. Fans noticed it. He wasn't being fully rejected, but he wasn't being welcomed back either. Will Smith was stuck in a strange limbo, seen everywhere, but not embraced anywhere, present, but disconnected, active, but uncertain about what came next. The harder he tried to control the story, the more obvious it became. The story wasn't his anymore. Every attempt to reclaim his voice only reminded people that he'd lost it. Slowly, Will edged closer to a truth he used to understand better than anyone. Sometimes the strongest comeback is patience, but patience takes trust, and Will didn't seem willing to wait anymore. When the endless interviews and social media presence failed to rebuild his reputation, Will turned back to where it all began: music. In early 2025, he announced his first full-length album in over 20 years, titled Based on a True Story. The message was clear. This wasn't about reliving the past or chasing nostalgia. This was about confession, about telling his side with no filters, no spin. And he promised an honest, personal project, something raw, real, and vulnerable. To make sure he got it right, he even reached out to legends like Jay-Z and Kendrick Lamar for advice. Their response? Simple but bold. Stop performing the image, tell the truth. And Will took that seriously. The album didn't dodge the hard stuff. He went straight for it. His public meltdown, his ego, his shame, that night at the Oscars. For once, he wasn't trying to be the universally likable star everyone could count on. He just wanted people to understand him. But the album didn't get the response he expected. Critics didn't hold back. They called it awkward, self-indulgent, even tone-deaf. Reviews said it felt emotionally clumsy and painfully earnest, like he was still trapped in the need to explain instead of just expressing. What Will thought would come across as raw and human ended up sounding like more justification. Instead of redemption, listeners heard desperation, and the vulnerability he hoped would heal his image only reminded people how far the Fresh Prince had fallen. The album's commercial performance matched the critics' cold response. It barely made a ripple. What was supposed to mark Will Smith's rebirth instead became another reminder of how much his star had dimmed. Social media turned it into a punchline, filled with memes and jokes that overshadowed any serious discussion of the music. People didn't hear growth, they heard a man still trapped in the very moment he was trying to move past. What should have been cathartic turned into proof that he couldn't escape the shadow of that one night. Still, Will didn't back down. He doubled down, dropping music videos, doing live performances, pushing the message harder than ever. The visuals were bright, youthful, loud, as if energy could replace connection. But the mismatch was hard to ignore. The tone didn't fit his age, his legacy, or the weight of what audiences now associated with him. Instead of reclaiming his space in pop culture, it looked like he was fighting to stay relevant inside it and losing ground every time. Music had once been the foundation of his empire, the spark that started it all. Now it exposed just how hard it was to reinvent himself in a world that had already moved on. The industry didn't banish him for trying, but it didn't exactly celebrate him either. Each release raised the same question. Was this evolution, or was it desperation dressed up as authenticity? And now, in this strange middle ground, Will Smith exists in a space very few stars ever reach, and even fewer ever escape. He's not completely rejected, but not fully redeemed either. His name still commands attention, but not the same trust. Studios approach him cautiously, weighing risk and reward. Audiences tune in, but with skepticism instead of excitement. Every interview, every appearance, every new project feels less like entertainment and more like a test, a referendum on whether he deserves another chance. What's clear, though, is that his downfall wasn't just about one slap. It was about timing, about years of quiet tension finally bursting in the most public way possible. That single moment didn't destroy his career. It simply confirmed what people had already started to sense, that the image of total control and emotional discipline had cracks in it all along. When that illusion shattered, everything he did afterward was seen through that same lens. Will Smith is still working, movies are still being made, songs are still being released, but something fundamental has changed. The automatic goodwill that once followed his name has disappeared. He no longer moves through Hollywood with the benefit of the doubt. Every word, every gesture, every smile is analyzed, second-guessed, and compared to the myth he once was. The man who used to embody certainty now lives under constant evaluation, proof that in Hollywood, one moment can rewrite an entire legacy. Now, Will Smith has to earn what once came to him effortlessly. The trust, the love, the admiration, all of it must be rebuilt piece by piece. And yet, his story refuses to wrap up neatly. Unlike so many fallen stars who vanish when the spotlight turns harsh, Will never fully disappeared. He stayed in front of the world, facing the noise, taking responsibility, and enduring the mockery that came with it. Instead of hiding, he kept showing up, even when it clearly hurt. That persistence, flawed but real, keeps his story from being written off as a simple tragedy. It complicates his fall, maybe even softens how history will remember him. Time has a strange way of shifting things. Outrage cools, empathy grows, and stories start to reshape themselves. But legacy? That's trickier. For Will Smith, his legacy is no longer defined by the massive blockbusters or the Golden Awards. It's defined by one moment, one impulsive act that changed everything. The slap didn't just interrupt his career, it redefined the man behind the myth. And what's left behind is a hard truth that Hollywood rarely likes to admit. Success doesn't shield you from collapse. Sometimes it speeds it up. When an image built on perfection finally cracks, rebuilding it takes more than public apologies or flashy comebacks. It takes patience, humility, and distance, 3 things that don't come easily to someone who's lived his whole life in the spotlight. So, here's the question that lingers after all of it, after the films, the fame, the music, and that moment. Was Will Smith's downfall really the result of one irreversible mistake,
Or was it the breaking point of years spent holding up an image that no one could live up to forever? In the quiet that follows all storms, Will Smith stands somewhere between reflection and rebirth. The noise has faded a little, not gone, but softer, replaced by questions that don't have easy answers. He's still working, still creating, still trying to turn the wreckage into wisdom. Every new appearance, every project feels like another test, not of talent, but of trust. People aren't watching to be entertained anymore. They're watching to see who he really is now. Hollywood has changed since the days when Will ruled the summer box office. Fame doesn't live in theaters anymore. It lives on screens you can hold in your hand. And in this new world, redemption isn't handed out by critics or studios. It's earned through time, honesty, and sometimes silence. The same platform that tore him apart could one day help him rebuild, but only if he learns to use it differently, not to prove, but to listen. Behind the scenes, those who've worked with him say he's quieter now, more patient, more aware of how quickly admiration can turn to judgment. He still laughs, still talks big dreams, but the spark feels different. Less like a spotlight, more like a candle trying to stay lit in the wind. There's humility there now, something he never used to show when everything came easy. And maybe that's what makes this chapter so different. It's not about reclaiming the old Will Smith, the blockbuster icon, or the flawless family man. It's about something smaller, more real, a man learning how to live without the illusion of perfection. For decades, his story was a symbol of control, the proof that charisma and discipline could conquer chaos. Now it's something else entirely, a reminder that even the strongest image can crack, and when it does, the only way forward is through the truth. People still debate him, still dissect every move, but maybe that's the price of being both legend and lesson. Because Will Smith's legacy isn't just about what he built, it's about what he's still trying to rebuild out in the open with everyone watching. And in that struggle between pride and peace, noise and silence, lies the real story now. Not the slap, not the memes, but the slow, unglamorous climb toward grace. The kind that doesn't come with applause or headlines, just time. Whether the world forgives him or not, one thing is certain: Will Smith is still here, still standing, and still trying to figure out who that really means he is. As the years pass, Will Smith's story keeps unfolding, not in explosive headlines, but in quiet moments that most people barely notice. He's not chasing the spotlight anymore. He's learning to live beside it. Every move feels slower, more deliberate, like a man rebuilding himself brick by brick. No more glossy image management, no more rehearsed perfection, just a raw kind of honesty that only comes after everything else is burned away. He's been showing up to smaller events, mentoring young creators, lending his voice to causes without trying to center himself in the spotlight. The old Will Smith charm doesn't turn heads now. It's the restraint, the calm, the sense that he finally understands what being seen really costs. The man who used to master every room now walks in with humility, knowing fame is fragile and forgiveness doesn't run on demand. Hollywood's relationship with him has shifted too. He's no longer the automatic lead, the sure bet that guarantees box office success. But in private meetings, producers still listen when he speaks. His name still holds weight, just not the same kind. It's not the currency of stardom anymore. It's the currency of experience. The industry may never fully restore him, but it quietly respects his endurance. Online, the conversation around him keeps cycling. Moments of sympathy, waves of mockery, flashes of hope. The slap still hangs over it all like a shadow that won't fade, but there's something else forming underneath it. A curiosity, maybe even a slow forgiveness, because time does strange things to public memory. What once felt unforgivable starts to look human. And maybe that's where Will Smith's story lands. Not in triumph, not in ruin, but in evolution. He's no longer the invincible movie star who could save the world before the credits rolled. He's the flawed man who couldn't save himself from one terrible moment, but who keeps trying to do better anyway. It's messy, uncomfortable, and endlessly human.
In interviews now, his voice carries more weight, less polish. When he talks about fame, it's not about success, it's about survival. When he talks about family, it's not about perfection, it's about forgiveness. The same man who once played heroes for the world is finally learning what it means to just be one person, without the mask, without the myth.
Inside Hollywood, his name still sparks debate. Some see a man who's taken responsibility and deserves another chance. Others think his time is past. But even his critics admit he never hid. He didn't vanish to a private island or pretend it never happened. He stayed in the mess and faced it, even when facing it cost him everything. That stubborn resilience might be the one part of his old self that never died. Behind the scenes, Will's focus has turned inward. He spends more time mentoring young filmmakers, pushing for stories that reflect growth instead of glamour. He's no longer chasing blockbusters, he's chasing meaning. Maybe that's the quiet revolution he's been building all along, trading the roar of fame for the peace of authenticity. And that's the thing. The story of Will Smith isn't finished. Maybe it never will be. He's still writing it, one project, one apology, one quiet moment at a time. The man who once defined success by applause now seems to measure it by honesty. The same world that once celebrated his perfection now watches him wrestle with imperfection. And that might be the most powerful performance of his life. Because in the end, the story of Will Smith isn't about a fall from grace. It's about the long, messy, uncomfortable climb back towards self-respect. And while the world may still be divided on him, one truth remains clear. He's still standing, still evolving, still human, and still not done writing his story. So here we are, the final chapter in a story that refuses to end neatly. Will Smith's journey has been everything Hollywood promises and everything it tries to hide. Fame, power, family, collapse, and the fight to rebuild when the world is no longer cheering. He's lived through it all under the harshest light possible, and somehow he's still standing. Not untouched, not undefeated, but alive, still searching for peace in a world that once demanded perfection from him. The slap may always hang over his name, but time changes how stories are told. Maybe one day it won't just be remembered as the moment that broke him, but the one that forced him to finally face himself. Because that's the real twist in all of this. The man who once played heroes for the world has spent the last few years trying to be one for himself. It's not glamorous, it's not cinematic, but it's real. And for the first time in decades, real might be enough. Hollywood loves a comeback story, but what Will Smith is chasing now isn't applause or headlines. It's peace, something quieter than fame and harder to earn than an Oscar. He's still creating, still showing up, still learning how to live without needing to be loved by everyone. And maybe that's what makes his story worth watching after all this time. Because at its core, it's not about the fall. It's about what you do once the noise fades and the only thing left to rebuild is yourself. No matter what side you're on, whether you still root for him or think his moment has passed, one thing's certain, his story isn't done, not by a long shot. There's still more to unfold, more to understand, and more to learn about what it really costs to live in the spotlight and try to find redemption beneath it. And if you've been following this story, if you felt the rise, the fall, and the quiet fight to rebuild, don't stop here, because there's always another side, another truth, another piece waiting to surface. Subscribe now to stay locked in as we uncover more stories like this, the unfiltered, behind-the-scenes truths of the people we think we know. Fame never tells the full story, but we do. Don't miss what comes next.